This episode is presented in the format of an audiobook. Every problem you encounter in life can be traced back to one simple cause. You care too much about what other people think of you. This concern with others' opinions lies at the core of much of our unhappiness. Today, we're exploring the book The Courage to be Disliked, written by Japanese philosopher and psychologist Ichiro Kishimi, together with author Fumitake Koga. According to the authors, inner worry is always connected to the external world. There is no such thing as a concern that exists entirely within the individual. What we often call internal worry doesn't truly exist. No matter what concern arises, the presence of other people is always involved. Kishimi and Koga argue that most of life's problems are actually simple to solve, and that life only appears complicated because we make it so. In their view, the single thing required to achieve happiness is the courage to be disliked. They explain that we must not fear being disliked by others. True freedom means being willing to be disliked. It's not that you lack self-confidence, rather, you lack courage. They also state that the courage to be happy necessarily includes the courage to be disliked. Once you gain this courage, your relationships with others begin to feel lighter and less burdensome. In this episode, we'll examine the book's core ideas, including the psychology behind unhappiness, why chasing external approval leads nowhere, and the author's guidance on how to live a genuinely fulfilling life. Kishimi and Koga's philosophy is grounded in the belief that everyone, regardless of their past, has the ability to become happy. The key difference between happy and unhappy people lies in their willingness to change. The book draws heavily on the theories of psychologist Alfred Adler. Adler believed that the self is a unified whole. The body, mind, emotions, and both conscious and unconscious thoughts all function together toward a single goal. According to Adler, everything we think, feel, and do is directed toward achieving that goal, even when we're not fully aware of it. From his perspective, goals don't just influence our happiness, they shape our identity. This suggests that the goals we choose define our sense of self. Kishimi and Koga build on this idea by explaining that Adler didn't focus on fixed personality traits. Instead, he viewed people through the concept of lifestyle. For Adler, your habits, emotions, and patterns of thought form a lifestyle that you chose at some point and continue to choose because you believe it helps you reach your goals. For instance, Kishimi and Koga argue that there's no such thing as a naturally antisocial person. Rather, antisocial behavior is a chosen strategy used to pursue certain objectives. They take this concept even further by suggesting that goals don't just guide our actions, they also shape our emotions. First, you decide what you want, and then you generate the emotions that support that goal. Imagine someone who wants a job but becomes so anxious about the interview that they fail to prepare or even show up. They may believe that if their anxiety disappeared, they'd have a better chance of being hired. However, Kishimi and Koga would argue that the person's real goal is to avoid the interview itself. Fear is created to serve that purpose. In reality, the person isn't truly seeking the job. They're trying to avoid the risk of failure, and fear helps them do exactly that. Kishimi and Koga also address the belief that past trauma prevents people from finding happiness. They counter this by pointing out that not everyone who experiences trauma remains trapped by it. While difficult childhood experiences may influence the goals a person adopts, they argue that it's still up to the individual to decide which goals to pursue and how to live. In the book, they write that no experience is inherently a cause of success or failure. We are not harmed by events themselves, often labeled as trauma, but by the meaning we assign to them. We are not shaped by our experiences, but by the interpretations we choose, making us self-determining beings. They further explain that no matter what has happened in your life so far, it doesn't have to dictate how you live from this moment forward. The person you are right now, living in the present, is the one who decides how your life unfolds. This leads to an important question. If happiness is within our control, why would anyone choose to be unhappy? According to Kishimi and Koga, unhappiness can actually function as a strategy. Some people unconsciously use it to achieve their goals. As discussed earlier, the authors believe that goals influence emotions. While occasional unhappiness is a normal part of life, people who are consistently unhappy are often driven by a single, persistent goal tied to frustration. This goal usually revolves around their relationships with others. This is crucial because Kishimi and Koga suggest that your overall happiness is determined by the goals you set within your relationships. In other words, what you're trying to accomplish through your connections with others largely determines how happy you feel. They explain that there are two main objectives people adopt in relationships: seeking approval or aiming to contribute positively to others' lives. Unhappy individuals often make gaining approval their primary goal. They believe happiness comes from being viewed as good by others. Whether that approval comes from parents, teachers, or society, the result is the same: dissatisfaction. At their core, unhappy people equate being liked with being a good person.
While many assume that the desire for validation is simply part of human nature, Kishimi and Koga argue otherwise. They suggest that people don't seek approval to become happy. Instead, approval feels good because it satisfies a deeper psychological need. In many cases, this need develops through systems of reward and punishment education. Even when unhappy people succeed in gaining approval, it comes at a high cost. By constantly chasing validation, they end up living according to someone else's expectations. In doing so, they sacrifice their freedom and ultimately their happiness. The authors explain that living while constantly monitoring others' reactions and trying to fulfill their wishes may provide guidance, but it results in a deeply unfree way of life. When people say they desire recognition, what they often mean is that they're afraid of being disliked. Unless a person is unaffected by others' judgments and willing to accept the possibility of never being recognized, they can never truly live according to their own values. Being praised means accepting another person's judgment of what is good or bad, using their standards as the measure. When praise becomes the goal, personal freedom is inevitably restricted. Beyond this, Kishimi and Koga argue that the biggest issue with seeking approval is that it's often unattainable. Approval depends on meeting others' expectations, which are largely outside your control. No matter how hard you try, there will always be someone who doesn't like you. When approval becomes impossible to achieve, unhappy people often shift their strategy. Rather than continuing to pursue something unattainable, they give up entirely. They stop trying and create emotions like fear or self-loathing to justify their withdrawal. However, by doing this, they remain controlled by the very goal they claim to abandon. Instead of letting go of the desire for approval, they deepen their attachment to it. This intensifies their unhappiness as they continue to suffer over something they've already resigned themselves to losing. Another strategy they adopt is convincing themselves that something is fundamentally wrong with them, making it impossible for others to like them. This belief allows them to avoid the risk of rejection, but it traps them in a hopeless and miserable existence where they believe they lack the power to change. Kishimi and Koga also explain that the need for external validation damages relationships. One reason is that unhappy people tend to view life as a competition. They see others as rivals, believing that someone else's success automatically means their own failure. Because approval is conditional, based on specific traits or achievements, people inevitably compare themselves to others. When someone else excels, the standards rise, making approval harder to obtain. Seeking validation becomes a zero-sum game, turning life into a contest with winners and losers. This mindset causes unhappy individuals to fear others' success and even take satisfaction in their failures rather than offering support. Such behavior makes healthy relationships impossible. Once people break free from this competitive framework, the need to defeat others disappears. Another way approval-seeking harms relationships is through entitlement. Unhappy people often believe relationships are built on sacrifice. When they constantly meet others' expectations, they grow resentful if those efforts aren't returned. For example, someone might organize an elaborate birthday party for a friend and feel hurt when that friend doesn't do the same in return. In this case, the act of kindness was really a transaction. When the other person feels pressured to reciprocate, resentment begins to grow. Having explored how seeking external approval damages both happiness and relationships, Kishimi and Koga present an alternative path. Happy people, they argue, focus on contributing to others rather than seeking validation. They find fulfillment in believing they are useful to someone. As long as they feel they're contributing, they don't worry about others' opinions. What it means to be useful is something each person must define for themselves. If something doesn't feel meaningful, even meeting expectations will feel empty.
They explain that when a person truly feels a sense of contribution, the need for recognition disappears. There's no longer a desire to be acknowledged because the individual already knows they're of value. In contrast, someone obsessed with recognition lacks a sense of community and has not achieved self-acceptance, trust in others, or genuine contribution. For happy people, helping others isn't an act of self-sacrifice. It's something they do because it brings them fulfillment. While this may sound selfish, Kishimi and Koga argue that it's perfectly valid to make your own happiness a priority. Since helping others creates joy, happy people can give without expecting anything in return. The motivation to help because it feels good is far stronger than helping merely to appear virtuous. Acting selflessly to be seen as a good person is simply another form of seeking approval. They also suggest that anyone can experience happiness by realizing that their existence alone can bring value to others. Humans naturally care about one another, and simply being present can be meaningful. Because of this belief, happy people accept themselves fully, even with their flaws and mistakes. They understand that their presence matters, regardless of achievements. While some people may contribute more than others, happy individuals don't see others' success as a threat. Instead, they celebrate it. Since they believe everyone has inherent value, life no longer feels like a competition. The achievements of others cannot diminish their own worth. Finally, happy people focus on the present moment, appreciating life as it unfolds. Kishimi and Koga believe happiness is always a choice available to us. Many people think they must accomplish something extraordinary to be happy, but the authors disagree. Happiness can be found simply by recognizing the positive impact you already have on others. This doesn't mean abandoning future goals, but rather finding meaning and joy in the process of pursuing them. That way, even if life were to end suddenly, it wouldn't feel wasted. The central message of the book is clear. No matter how you live, some people will dislike you. Because of this, the only path to lasting happiness is accepting that reality and having the courage to live according to your own values, regardless of others' opinions. This is why letting go of the need for approval and developing the courage to be disliked is essential.